people in the back row, I don't want them to hide from me. So, good morning. I'm Mike Gower. I'm the Executive VP and for Finance and Administration Treasurer. Welcome to the Treasurer's Town Hall. I hope this will be an overview of the systems projects that are going on right now, and then we'll also take questions towards the end on any number of other topics that you might want to think about. I also have the brain trust of the project team right here, so if I'm stumped, they won't be stumped by any questions you might have. So we're going to talk a little bit about just a reminder of what the projects consist of, what's going on right now, managing change, really talking about the communications and training, which is really coming more to the forefront now that we're getting closer and closer and closer to this, how you can be part of the process, and then leave as much time as we can for Q&A. I always like to go back to the planning goals. You know, what is it that drove this large transformation, this big effort, this multi-year initiative? Supporting effective, efficient, responsive business practices and processes. Certainly that was the element that the president put into the university's strategic plan. It's an effort to not only make the place work better, but to do it more cost effectively, more efficiently, more effectively, so that we can put resources into the academic programs where we need them. Provide real savings for strategic initiatives, that same element. The transition to responsibility center management budgeting model to set up a way of accounting, a way of measuring that is aligned with the budget and the reporting that's needed there. And then in terms of reporting, providing reliable and accessible information through improved management reporting capabilities. And this is an element that is foremost as we look at everything. We have a team devoted to reporting questions, and we'll be working that throughout the entire multi-year effort here. Of course, the biggest reason that isn't even shown there is Rutgers merged with another university to become a new Rutgers. And we want modern, effective, efficient, responsive systems and processes, business processes, to work for the new Rutgers. So this is an overview of all the projects that are going on. By the way, all these slides are available through my website, which is finance.rutgers.edu. You can download them there. And what we have done as a principle in this project is to focus on organizational alignment and business processes first. Get to those, look at the business practices, look at the way that Rutgers did business, the way that UMD&J did business, the way that best practices suggest out in the field, the way that the software suggests, and get ourselves to a new, better way of doing business. But also to organize ourselves in a way that's customer-focused, efficient, effective. So the first project out of the gate was research administration. That started about November of 2014. You may have heard of that, of Excellence in Research Administration, era.rutgers.edu. That has been going through, actually, it's just started its third wave of implementation of non-system business process changes to improve research administration. And there I come back to, again, who is the customer? We went forward in that project that the principal investigator was the customer and that the sponsor was the customer, and that we would focus on our efforts on making it work better for them. And if we did that, then everybody else would be taken care of. In each of these efforts, we look for who are the customers, who are the specific ones that we are trying to help through this effort, and really focus our attention to that. So era.rutgers.edu has a lot of information regarding these initiatives, these waves, as well as what's going on in some of the information systems. Some of you may have been involved in the first phase of RAPS, which is the online pre-award system. It was in test mode last fall. And we'll be doing a second pilot this spring associated with some of the granting agency deadlines, submission deadlines. And then there are a number of other initiatives there around things like electronic conflicts of interest that are needed for conduct of science. That is the first, was the first live pan-university new system that is up and running. And there'll be a number of other ones associated with IRB, animal care, and also certification of time and effort. So a lot of activity going on there. The next one that came out of the chute was budgeting. Who in here has used the Hyperion tools for budgeting? Okay. Some of you may have used them in prior years. They are now set up to be used across the entire university. Central administrative functions and administrative functions that are associated with chancellor offices have been using those tools since October to prepare their budgets. Schools, centers, institutes, and auxiliaries, in other words, responsibility centers, now have access to Hyperion for budgeting. And you'll be getting instructions from budget authority, whether it be the chancellor's office or someone else, in short order, if not already, in regards to how to use that system to prepare your budgets. We also have developed a cost management model using some tools from the same company that does the planning app. And what that is doing is automating the whole RCM calculation process so that we aren't dependent on a giant, and I do mean giant spreadsheet, or a set of spreadsheets for those kinds of calculations in the future. And it'll also allow for a much more transparent view of those costs and how they come from a central unit and how they go to a responsibility center. In the controller's office, probably one of the biggest changes going on, not only organizationally, not only business processes, but this is where the new general ledger is coming out. The new general ledger will be going live in October 1st, along with many of these other applications. And there will be a brand new chart of accounts, one that is a single chart across the entire new Rutgers, one that is aligned with Responsibility Center management. The reporting model built into the chart of accounts is set up to feed management information for RCM reporting. We'll take care of all the other business, but it's really focused on management reporting. In addition, there is in that suite of applications a new integrated grants management system, first integrated grants management system that either university has ever had, now the one New Rutgers is having, and that is tied in with the general ledger and in real time. This is a great system that will allow a PI to see all of his or her projects in one dashboard and then be able to track into specific transactions or specific activities regards to grant and contract activity. That same functionality will be available for things such as restricted gifts, things like endowment payout accounts, for what have been in the past called designated funds, monies that you're setting aside for multi-year projects like startup funds or small capital projects or what have you. That same functionality will be available for that. We are going to be having a series of town halls starting in starting in May, on the chart of accounts. And that'll be at each campus around the New Brunswick and around the other campuses of the university. And there'll be a lot more information about that coming. Procurement, again, organizational redesign. We have merged the personnel that came from two universities into one procurement office now, and we're setting up the new business practices associated with an automated procure-to-pay system. If you are in RBHS, you may be familiar with the SciQuest tools. The SciQuest tools have been used for a number of years. They're being upgraded, spiffed up, made to work more integrated with everything else, and extended to the rest of the university. So this is a marketplace concept. It's where one goes on and looks for an item under contracts that already exist, under catalogs that exist, and that you'll be able to order things and have them turn into automatic POs right away. A lot of good functionality there, and there's already been some demonstrations of these at business advisory groups, and there'll be much more coming up. In addition, we are replacing the Tabor, the wonderful Tabor, or the equivalent tool, with an online iExpense tool. This will allow for someone to collect all the things that need to be reimbursed in one place, even to use cameras off of smartphones to take pictures of receipts and load them into the system. Very, very straightforward. This is nothing new. It's been used in industry for years, so we're just catching up with it. So it would move towards getting reimbursements to be much more efficient, much more timely. In addition to that, I've mentioned at previous meetings that in a second phase, we want to get into use of travel cards so that individuals don't have to use their own personal credit cards to carry university business. Instead, we would have these travel cards that will be integrated with this iExpense functionality and tie in directly with that. That's going to be in a phase after we get everything else stable and live, but we'll be coming to that pretty quickly. Student information, student enrollment, account management. This is a big, big area. If anybody here is involved in student services, then you know that we have, I don't think anybody argue we have terrible systems and we have old processes and we have a mishmash of policies. And we're not terribly good at being student facing. We have a lot of work here to do, to the extent that we haven't even picked what the new student information system will be yet, because we have so much to do in terms of organizational change, in terms of business process change, into determining what should be central versus what should be New Brunswick, Newark, Camden, RBHS. So there's a team, a consulting team in the university right now from Deloitte Consulting, who has been working with Barbara Lee, the Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs, and me, to look at everything associated with enrollment management, financial aid, registrar, and student accounts, and to advise us on, and they've spent time not only talking to staff, but faculty, administrators, and hundreds of students about what works and what doesn't work, mainly what doesn't work. And coming to us with recommendations about how to reorganize the functions, how to change the business processes, how to change the orientation in terms of customer service, and how to just make it work better for the student, which is, if you recall, another key cornerstone of the university's strategic plan, one that the president is very, very keen on fulfilling. When we're talking about serving the student, we're also talking about the student's parents or others who are involved in that process, and certainly the other side of it being the faculty and the academic administration and the student service group that has to work on the other side of the table from that. So we're even looking at physical elements there, like how to set up a good one-stop shop, how to set up a physical arrangement, how to get more things online, how to get things more things mobile. A lot of work to do there, great recommendations. We also need to get into the other areas of student services that need to be in a system in the future. And then somewhere, I would guess, about a year from now, we'll actually pick a system. But we're waiting and to let the market out there mature, let these things get upgraded, get better along the way, and pick the best one for us. And last but not least, migration from Banner to PeopleSoft in HR payroll. So this is arguably the most important project here from the standpoint of we're dealing with people's pay, and we need to get it right. What we're doing is moving everyone who is now getting paid on the Banner HR payroll system to the PeopleSoft HR payroll system. And we're doing that so, one, we have everybody in one place and do away with this idea of different types of employees. We'll have one set of employees. We'll have multiple union contracts and multiple benefit plans, just like we do already in the PeopleSoft system, but we won't have this, are you a PeopleSoft employee or a Banner employee thing going on. So that's a big deal. We're going to be bringing all those folks over and testing the paychecks to make sure that they're right. They will be different because of changes in pay policy and in the way that one system calculates things versus another, in the changes in how deductions will be handled that are different between the two universities. But we want to be sure that everybody is getting the right pay, and that is a critical piece of that. Once we get everybody on a single HR payroll system, then we can start to upgrade it. Then we can start to add the features, reorganize it, do it in the right way, and that will be coming up in a phase 2. But the first most important thing is to get everybody on one system, get them paid correctly. I want to pause there. Any questions? Just the overview of projects. Okay. This is a great pictorial of how everything comes together. There's this thing called Oracle Cloud Financials. That is the product that we're using for our financial accounts payable and also the grants management component. The cloud means that it's not hosted here. We don't actually have it on boxes on premise. It is being hosted by Oracle. Do we know, Alan, do we know where? What's the primary site? Chicago? Yeah. So if anybody's been around computing for a long time, like I have, and I'll just show my age, there was a time back in the 70s when the thing to do was to have all your computing power in one place and access it remotely. And we are back there again, so many years later. But we're back there for a number of reasons. We want to do cloud because, one, we don't need to be running those boxes on campus. Running the boxes means we have to keep up with capital there. We have to have the database administrators, the system administrators, all those sorts of things that we can't get nearly to the scale that a company like Oracle or Amazon's in this business, Microsoft's in this business, all them are. They can do those economies of scale. But also, we don't have to worry about business continuity or disaster recovery because that's their responsibility. In addition to it being live in Chicago, it's going to be duplicated somewhere else in the country, somewhere some distance away, so that if anything actually happened to the place in Chicago, we'd be able to flip over somewhere else. Or if anything happened here, like, heaven forbid, another Sandy, where power went out or access was limited, we could get to the system and do the things we need to do remotely. So this is taking into account not only what happened here and like in New York City, where I worked for a university and one of the campuses was offline for a week, power-wise. how to take care of this. Also, Tulane went through this many years ago after Hurricane Katrina, and we have to plan for that. So that's why we're going to the cloud for almost everything we do. This is the first big phase of it. This is the procurement, SciQuest, where we have all the little modules in here that have to do with making that work. It too is cloud-based. So it too is being hosted by another company outside. And I talked about budgeting, I talked about HR payroll. Eventually, the HR payroll will go to the cloud. For the interim, it will be the same PeopleSoft system that you all know and love right now. We'll just keep using it until we can upgrade in a year or so. And then there will be a reworked financial data warehouse, one that will be tied in with the new financial transactions, the new chart of accounts, how it works going forward, and will be accessible through a number of different tools. And we'll be talking a lot about that in a later town hall. So this is hard to read, but the key point is that these are all the projects we have, and the target deadlines are, you can see, mostly October. October 1 is our primary go-live date. And the next most important thing on this is that the status is all green. So for the moment, we've been working very hard to keep this on schedule, keep it on pace, and so far so good. Doesn't mean that we won't hit some bumps, but we are vigilant about holding to this October 1 date. Some other things, the budget planning and forecasting, I mentioned that before, is live now. It has had its upgrade, it's had its rework, it is live now. RAPS implementation, if any of you involved in grants and contracts on the pre-award side, in June of this year is what's called the Phase 2A rollout. That's the expanded pilot group for electronic submission of grant proposals, and a second phase, a Phase 2B, in December. We're also expecting sometime in the spring a rollout of electronic IRB process. So I want to pause there. Any questions about the timeline of the projects? David? Hi. Hold on, let me get the mic since we're recording here.
Thanks. I have a question which is sort of a legal one. I know you care a lot about transparency. So are Rutgers records held in the cloud by a corporation considered public records that are accessible through the Open Public Records Act?
Yes, they do not change. Just because it's held there doesn't mean that our responsibilities or obligations change any. It's just simply where it's stored. Other questions? Okay. Oh, sorry, Stephanie. I didn't do the fancy, you know. So that one's live. Okay, we're going to try something here. So one of the things that we are doing in terms of training is to have, and I'll talk about more in a minute, is to have how-to videos on the web, on YouTube. It's scary as hell, the prospect of being out on YouTube. But can we, I already am, I didn't even know it, from one of these town halls before. Okay.
Hello. This video will show users how to log into RU Budget, Rutgers University's budget planning application. We strongly recommend that users use Firefox as the browser to log into the application. So after opening Firefox, go into the address bar and type the URL of the application. https://epm www.rutgers.edu/workspace. Then hit enter and you will be directed to the login screen. You can then type in your RIAS or core username and password. You can then hit the logon button. You will then be taken to the main Hyperion application page. The next video will show you how to get into the RU Budget application. Hello.
Oh,
This video will show users how to log
once is enough. So that's just an example of what we are trying to do for as many of the business processes and areas that people need to know about. If you're going to be using Hyperion for budgeting, these videos are out there right now on the Budget Office website, or actually they're linked, where are they? Through the Budget Office website, yeah. And there'll be a link there that gets you to the YouTube page. And if anybody recognizes that, that was Andy Rosnell, who was, it was funny talking to him about how he was doing these videos. He had to get his timing just right. And unfortunately, if you don't know, he's leaving us at the end of the month to go to Weill Cornell in New York. So, and sorry to, we have to get all the videos done though before he leaves. Okay, have to have that nice steady voice. You know. So this is a good example. If you need to see things about the budget, go see that. But we'll be doing that for each of the modules, each of the major functions that we've got going on here as part of the reference in the training. So let me talk about testing, then we'll talk about training, we'll talk about communications. So this system will be thoroughly tested. There's in fact 3 or 4 different stages of testing that are necessary. The first one coming up is called systems integration testing. And what this does is make sure that the business processes that we expect, that we programmed into the configuration of the system, work as expected. Now, we don't actually expect 100% of them to work. What's a good mark for SIT 1? 75%. Okay. If we hit 75%, we got it right the first time, then that's a good that's a good mark. And what happens is out of that, you learn why it didn't work, what's going on, how to fix it, how to reconfigure it, and you do that. And this is using real converted data. You know, so it's taking data from RIAS, it's taking data from Banner, it's loading it into the system as it would be in the, when we're live, and running these processes. So that will go on between about the middle of April and the middle of May. Then those fixes will be done, those changes will be done, those repairs will be done, and we're going to system integration testing too. This is doing the same thing. It will have more things in it like the conversions, different integrations from other systems. Again, testing all the business processes, running them through the whole set of paces. And then by about the middle of July, we'll know where we stand with that. Then we go into a third set, and this is the user acceptance testing. And the key element there is user. So here we'll be testing the system from the perspective of people who will actually be doing their normal work in it. And in fact, many people who do their normal work in it, we will be asking to participate in this testing. That'll go on through the balance of the project right up until we go live, pretty much. So you see down here, testing participants be trained. Here we want the functional teams and their number of super users, people who are embedded around the university. who will be part of this round of testing. Again, super users involved in the second round, but here we'll be pulling a number of end users. We're actually bringing, normal work to the table, if you will, and trying it out with the system. So significant amount of testing. We'll also be testing the data conversions. So the data from RIOS, the data from Banner, that it's converted, if you will, or it's remapped to how we're counting in the new chart of accounts, and run that through and make sure that the balances match, so that we know what we're doing going into it. Questions on testing? You can't test enough. I think that's the rule of thumb. We test, we test, we test. And in fact, one of the primary reasons for changing the date, you might recall it was July 1, moving it out to October 1st, was so that we would have more time for testing, in particular around the data conversion and around the movement of grant balances from the old systems to the new, and for the RBHS Banner to PeopleSoft payroll, so that those payrolls, we had plenty of time to test them. See, the consequence of having the room not, look at the U here. It's so tiny. The consequence of the setup here is that those of you in the back will be impossible to see this, probably. It's hard for me to see, and I know I have to go see the optometrist. So we're developing a comprehensive training solution, because there's just not one way to train. And in fact, we need multiple ways of training, because studies certainly show that if you're trained too far ahead of go live and too far ahead of actually touching the system, you won't retain it. So we need to prepare ourselves for almost just-in-time training with a lot of support in addition to that. Things like the videos, things like cheat sheets, other job aids that would have. So if you look at these elements, they're important things to consider in our training. First, the audience. Well, we have lots of campuses. So one of the challenges here versus projects I've been on before is we have the geographic question. At least, one could argue, 4 major areas that we need to hit. But within New Brunswick, you can't just hit one of the campuses. Roles are important. Defining roles. What is it that you are supposed to do in your job? How does that fit into the configuration of the system and into security and into the work that you're supposed to do in it? Access to the training itself and availability. We have individuals who are dealing right now with where to have training, what rooms would be available, where can we set up rooms, can we bring a classroom in a box somewhere and run training labs. Certainly there's a lot in terms of curriculum. The content is critical. It's specific to the 3 major projects and the elements within that. So we have different modules that are being prepared, just as you would see with those budget elements. Tools, we need process documentation. We also need to be able to track attendance at these things, because we're going to let people in by virtue of taking training. The roles will be specific, such that you need to go through training before you can get the security access. So we'll need to be able to track that. We're going to have multiple types of delivery, instructor-led training on laptops, as traditionally thinking of, but also hands-on activities through webinars or through online access and e-learning tools. In this case, we're getting a lot of help from Rich Novak and Division of Continuing Studies on some best methods for training, some best paths, delivery methods, and so on. He and his crew have been instrumental to helping us come up with real good modern strategy for this. Logistics are a big deal. I mentioned that before, just figuring out where we can have these things around 2 campuses in Newark, 1 in Camden, and arguably 4 or 5 here. So that's being worked on right now in terms of grabbing space, grabbing setups. How do we do that? And then finally, how do we support people? We're going to be supporting through training tools like I've shown you, but also super users who are scattered throughout different departments, a help desk, and a chat room. We're also going to be doing a lot of, what do we call them, the brown bag, the bring your work to lunch thing, where we'll be setting up labs. We'll have subject matter experts in the room. You can bring your work. You can actually walk through it with a subject matter expert. Last place I was at, that was very effective for people to get used to the system and to be able to see how it really worked again with their own work. We're taking a 5-phase approach to training. This again was advised by current best practices. It's the prepare me, tell me, show me, let me, and help me. So in the next few months, we're going to be doing the prepare me. We're going to be having road shows. Tremendous amount of communication is going to be coming out around this. It's really to tell you what are the facts, what to expect. I'll say up front that in the long run, things are going to be better than they are now. In the short run, things are going to be harder. Anytime you change to a new system, you go through what is lovingly referred to as the valley of despair. And your goal is to get from the valley of despair to the mountain of hope. So the mountain of hope is where you want to go, where you want to be in the future, where things are working the way they're expected, you're getting your work done, you know what your work now is, and you move on. But, I'm not going to kid anybody. You got to go through the valley of despair to get there because we're going to change everybody's world. Can't help that. So by changing everybody's world, it's how long are you in the valley of despair and how steep is the curve getting out of it? How deep is it? How fast can you get out of it? That's normal. That's normal change management, and it's something that we have to attune to in terms of our training and support. How do we get you through what is a state of confusion? And that state of confusion is where you can learn the most and get you out of it. And here will depend on all the things I talked about before. Will also depend upon the super users, the people who have, they're really into this stuff. They get it, and they can help others get it as well. But, I'm not going to kid anybody. It will be tough. It'll be tough. And so what we will want to tell you is not the sugar-coated view of this, but just the facts, what you can really expect. You'll be starting to see screens. You'll start to see some of the results of the testing, see what it looks like going forward, some things to expect. Then is the tell me. Here is where we talk about what's going on, and we really start talking about how the processes are changing as a result of the system and as a result of these other initiatives that we've had on. So that's going to start around in the June timeframe. The show me, real transactional demonstrations, live system training, sandbox training, and then really understand process flows. How do you hire, well, that's not a good example. How do you initiate a grant, and how do you work it through its process? How do you buy something? How do you set up an RFP? All those sorts of things are keys that we'll be showing in these process flows. And then the let me is when the training really, the hands-on stuff starts. And you notice that's really up here towards the end. Again, because if we start that too early, retention is more difficult. We really need to have it as close to October 1 as possible. But because retention is difficult, then we have to have the help me through support, email, phone, simulations, things that are available to show how does something work through, go live support, and again, more training being available, a sandbox being available, a way for you to go somewhere and say, I need to set up this grant and see step by step how to do it. And then try it out yourself in a sandbox. So this is the approach we're taking. It's an effective one for a project of this size. I think we've got the right people in place for this. We're getting ready. I'll come back to that. We're getting ready to hire a training manager to focus directly on the content and make it consistent. But the logistics are getting worked on. The other elements are getting worked on right now. Questions about training? There must be questions about training. Yes, sir. Here, where's the mic? Sorry, this is for virtue of recording. Yeah,
So I think I have a two-part question.
okay.
My first question is, and I think you alluded to it in your last comment about the training manager. So my question was, who would be doing the actual training, and when are those people going to be identified? That's one question. And my other question is, we do have faculty here at the university, so are we leveraging our teachers here at the college to help out with this training?
Thank you. So who will be the trainers? There'll be quite a number of different people. When we say we're hiring a training manager, that's not somebody who's necessarily going to do the training. That's someone who's helping to get the content right. The training will be done by members of the team, the project team, by members of the offices that are involved, like procurement or grants management or what have you. We also expect to tap super users, people who are really have been involved in the testing process. They will come from schools or colleges or departments, and they're very facile. We find that they'll be facile at it, and we'll tap them to come in and do the training. So it's going to be quite a number of people when we're done. And if you think about just the size of the institution, we'll need quite a number of people to do it. So it's a variety of things. In terms of tapping resources, we're tapping a number of resources. I mentioned Department of Continuing Studies as one way because there's a lot of that going on. We're also tapping, in procurement, we're tapping the supply chain management group within Rutgers Business School, who are helping us not only with processes but thinking towards in terms of how do we do the procurement in the long run. So we're trying to tap as many resources as we can. Can I answer?
Just one follow-up.
Yeah.
It's great that we have a lot of super users that are out there, but I think we need to make sure we have a train the trainer type of session.
Yeah, no, that's the intent, is definitely train the trainer. And when I'm thinking about super users, those are those trainers to a large extent. Because they really are part of the units, not the central functions. Other questions? You're all an easy crowd today. Let's talk about communications, because this is something that is ramping up fast and furious, right, Stephanie? So we have two elements of the strategy. One is that we develop, since we have multiple projects going on, and in this case multiple work teams, we don't want multiple messages. We don't want it to, the look and feel of the communication to be different. That would just be confusing. So we're developing an umbrella communications framework and aligning the messages so that you're not going to get 3 messages in the same hour on 3 different topics. That you'll get messages that are aligned, that they are timed appropriately, that they complement one another, not kind of compete with one another. This is the real need here, these 2 items. Strengthening the understanding of why we're doing this, what we expect out of it, and what are the ultimate benefits. And I say ultimate benefits because, again, we're not going to pretend that it isn't going to be hard to get through the initial go-live. But we do expect that the end product is something that's much better than we have today. And then finally, galvanizing people around collaboration, more efficient operations. So this is not only where a central unit interacts with you as a customer, but it's how the central unit interacts internally, so as to be most efficient in its own processes. So the strategic approach to this is building a solid foundation of resources and materials that are going to be readily available, establishing a normal cadence of relevant, timely communications to inform, but also to engage people, and creating different ways of getting information. So not just via email, but via the web, via video messages, via other resources that we can tap. Okay, next time we got to change the type. White on this big room doesn't work, so I'll have to read this to you. So these are our three segments of communications: plan and build, execute, and amplify. And so what that says is now is the strategic framework, what I was just speaking about, the branding of the project, so that there is, understand when you hear something about project blank, you know where it's coming from. The message, core materials, the development, tactical development, and then engaging stakeholders through processes like this and other town hall opportunities that we have, other big meetings that we have coming forward. Execution starting in April, implementing the tactical plan, really getting into the stakeholder engagement at that point. And then in June to October, the amplify. Deepen, broaden the message, really start telling the story, because we want to tell how is your work going to change, how is it going to be different, how is it going to work. So it is really telling the story, and then intensifying the stakeholder engagement. So it's building up over a number of months into a crescendo that really makes sense. Anything I missed there, Stephanie? Did you want to stress? This is Stephanie Reed. She's our communications officer for the project. And she comes to us with a wealth of experience and creativity. And so we're very happy to have her at Rutgers and working on this important project. So next steps, I talked about recruiting a training manager. We have been in this process already, soliciting and integrating feedback and validating business processes with two groups, the business advisory groups and school unit representatives. Anybody here on one of those teams? Okay, a couple people. So this is what I would call a set of initial focus groups. These are people who are identified either by the chancellor's offices or school, the dean's offices around, to be an internal focus group to us, to help us make sure that assumptions make sense. It can't be too big because it then be unmanageable. So it's limited and it's spread out across all the different chancellor units of the university. So you're talking about a lot of meetings, a lot of people. But this has been going on. I think there are actually several meetings this week of the business advisory groups where you see actual things going on in terms of, I believe, what is procurement this week? Procurement and expense are having meetings of that this week. Then we're getting into the planning of the testing, the training and engagement, user communities. This is where we'll expand to bring in some of the users into those system integration testings that I mentioned before. And then enlisting support, engagement, of communication networks across the academic units, campus communities, and projects. here we need to tap, you know, how does communications in SEBS really work? You know, not create something new that doesn't align with how does SEBS itself like to convey information throughout the college. So that's something that can be tailored that we want to tap into. So it's because it's not one size fits all. People do, or units, dean's offices do things differently. Departments do things differently. So we want to be able to tap that to get the best information out as wide and as deep as possible. How can you be part of the project or part of the process? You can be part of the project too. So we have a number of ways you can do that. There are project mailboxes that exist for each of these projects. You can tap them through finance.rutgers.edu. Soon there will be a project website that will have extensive access to information, but also ability to put in a question. And then what we would like to do as those questions are answered, we post those questions with the answers to the website so that you know, that information can become more widely known. So you can access those by going to the finance.rutgers.edu, and it's under the projects, initiatives, under the initiatives tab. You can also contact a business advisory or school unit representative group member. And how do we get, same place. Okay, so those people are on that same site, the information in terms of how to contact them. So going to that website will allow you to get all those contacts in. Again, we will have a website dedicated for the project very soon, and it will also be linked from, we'll try to make sure that there's a link from the home pages of each campus, but also through this way. And then you can also contact me. Questions? Like I said, you're just too easy today. I was at NJMS recently, and they had me there for half an hour with questions. You can do as well as that, right? I'm not that clear.
You're pretty clear. What's the future of the RIAS system? When is that going to be phased out, and what will replace it
So
for normal users?
yeah, so two pieces that you would normally now be using RIAS for is the financial operations and for procurement. Okay, so this cloud financial system is really your primary access to financial information, or if you're involved in financial transactions, now through RIAS, that's where you would go. Then the SciQuest portal for procurement replaces the RIAS procurement functionality. So you'll be going on to, you know, what I'd like to say it's Amazon-like. It's just Amazon-like because it still is institutional, but you know, you go on there and there'll be catalogs for each contract that we have that you can tap into, pick items, put them in your shopping cart, and then check out through a charge-out process to whatever is the appropriate chart of accounts string or project code. So that's what's going to replace that. PeopleSoft is going to stay around for a little bit longer. Again, we wanted to get everybody on one system, and then in phase 2, which will start this fall, we'll start to bring in new HR functionality in the cloud over the course of the next year. But before that, we'll be starting a business process and organization redesign of all the HR functions and payroll functions, not only central, but those that are embedded in colleges and in departments and other units. So I answered more than your question there. Other questions? are you?
My question is related to Ria's question. We currently use Ria's for the discovery report, different report to get ready for the monthly closing.
Yeah.
Hyperion is not ready for that level of reporting, so what's the option?
Sure. Good question. So currently there is a lot of reporting using discovery tools against the existing financial data warehouse. So two answers. One is that the financial data warehouse is going to get upgraded to the new chart of accounts, the new features, the new information that's available. And then there will be a new set of tools. There'll be standard reports. There'll be access to information using other tools, like some of you may be using Tableau as a tool. So we will have and then then there are also reports that are going to be embedded in the system itself. It's called Business Transactional Information. Transactional Business Intelligence, fancy name is. That these are reports that are embedded in the system itself, so that you can tap straight from the screens. So that we've spent a lot of time focusing on reporting. We're going to have what I think is a good start to the reporting, and then we're going to be expanding it and extending it as we go into subsequent phases. But we identified, I know 31 was the first set of reports. There's been more since then. A whole bunch of standard reports that 67 standard reports that are commonly used presently. And this is from really tapping into units all over the university. Those are getting designed and put together as the starting point for financial information. And similarly, there will be procurement-related reporting. And then, of course, grant-related reporting. Yes?
I have a broader question
Okay.
about just the financials of the university, so I don't want to pull off topic yet if people
Okay.
still have.
No, that's fine. We can do
Okay,
that.
cool. So my question was about this category of stuff known as the unrestricted funds, which I know legally they're unrestricted, but a lot of them are designated for certain uses by the university. A lot of
Yeah.
that's money that comes in on and then is spent on like a semesterly basis because
Right.
it comes in for tuition and then is spent on the things
Right.
tuition pays for. So I was wondering if you have an idea of what portion of that unrestricted fund money isn't earmarked for either that annual spending or longer term spending, and then if you could also talk about growth of the unrestricted funds through interest, or I know like President Barchi talked about like growth of that fund through the overnight market, and whether that money that we bring in through interest or investment is earmarked for a certain purpose, or sits in the bank for a rainy day, basically.
Sounds like your question, David. So there are funds on the books that are technically unrestricted, but they have been generated by colleges, departments, institutes, auxiliaries like housing and so on, from time to time over periods. There are actually thousands of funds that are set aside in that, because they go down to individual monies that have been set aside for faculty startup, for supporting a grant activity, for supporting a particular instructional program. It could be any number of things. But the list is literally pages and pages and pages of things that constitute that. In terms of what I would call core unrestricted funds of the university, to be frank, for a university this size, we don't have that much. We don't have that much because we had to use a substantial component of those to affect the merger. You know, if the merger was done without any money coming in from the state, the only money we got to do the merger was from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Thank goodness. That was an important $12 million. And they've subsequently given us another $4 million to do pieces that we couldn't get done the first round. So a substantial amount of money was used from the central reserve to fund the merger. The other thing that has happened is because of the reorganization of the university into chancellor units, we've actually, you know, a lot of the responsibility for funds management is sitting with the 4 chancellors now. There's a relatively small amount of money that is what I would call central, or the President's Strategic Initiatives funds. In a $3.8 billion budget, it's less than 1/10 of 1% of that budget, if I'm doing my math right. So you'll see a big number on there. It's the kind of thing that if the chancellor went to go get those funds, technically could be done. There'd be a revolt. And in terms of responsibility center management, we really have put responsibility for financial rainy day funds out to the deans and out to the chancellors. So some of those are necessary to be backstops for lean years, which we have had quite a number in the past 5 to 7 years. In terms of growth from year to year, so there's 2 elements of that. Certainly there is an investment element. We invest our cash, and we happened to have a really good year last year in investing that cash. It is more because of the weirdness that went on in the market in the last year that favored where we were positioning those investments. We positioned them in pretty safe investments, but they happened to hit a cycle that provided a good return. But I would not count on it. In fact, we normally count on, Richard, what's our bogey? Yeah, so we normally shoot for better than you can get on overnight return, better than you can get on T-bills and that kind of thing by a substantial amount. But we just happened to have a good year last year. And we're using a substantial amount of that leftover money to deal with deferred maintenance issues. It really is the impetus for our, you know, if you're lucky like that, we need to put it into things like deferred maintenance, which we have more than you can possibly imagine, unless you have a big imagination. Did I address your question? I'm happy to get details. In fact, I'm working on details. Yeah. Other questions? Oh, come on now. All right. Let me just take a minute and talk about RCM and then let you all go. If you're involved in budgeting at a responsibility center level, then the budget system is open to you and will be available for budgeting based on how your chancellor's office and dean's offices or director's offices want to do it. The budget system is open to the 4 chancellor units till May the 6th. In there will be assumptions in terms of, or there'll have to be assumptions in terms of enrollments, in terms of revenues in general, and then the allocated costs that are going to be loaded into it based on the responsibility center. We did budget hearings for each of the central administrative units that feed into RCM. I can tell you that we know there is not much money available, and we know that those units have been held to very, very, very tight limits. We were only able to fund some initiatives that are mandatory, things that are required by regulation, or they're things that just have to get done because of, in one case, because of a serious maintenance issue. But there's so few that we're really not seeing. Nobody got their wish list. In fact, the wish list, many of them got turned back and said, we want you to do these, but you need to figure out how to quit doing something else in order to fund it. So the allocations will be very, very tight. And then all the statistics and the various things that were done a year ago have been done and are getting posted. So really now it's in the hands of the chancellor units for the next several months, a month and a half. And how those work from the particular responsibility centers. As I say, the central budget office gets to sit back and prepare for the onslaught that's coming when we have to put the whole thing together. We are assuming that the governor's budget proposal, which called for flat funding year to year of the university, will be the best we're going to do. We will also have a contingency in case the legislature decides to do something else. But that's not great. It's better than last year when we got a cut under the guise of a flat funding. But we got a 3.4% cut last year of state funding. It's terrible to think of flat as good, but it's better than last year. So that's the assumption that we're running on. We actually will not know until the last week of June, which is why we don't have a budget until July. So, questions? I'm happy to stay around. If anybody wants to, somebody didn't want to